Hi, everybody. This is Bob Goodwin with Career Club, and welcome to today's Career Club LinkedIn Live. We're super pleased to have Ken Fenyo, who's the president of Coresight Research, on with us. Before we get started, if you're not familiar with Career Club, we're helping folks find careers that matter to them using proven sales and marketing techniques. Also, we want to announce that we've just launched an outplacement service called Next Placement. So if you know of anybody who is getting caught up in the layoffs that seem to be happening these days, we'd love to be able to help them as well. So please feel free to check us out at career.club. Please feel free to connect with me directly on LinkedIn, as well as follow Career Club. We're posting content pretty much every day and want to make sure that you don't miss any of it. This is a live stream, which means that you've got the ability to comment and ask questions. So first thing is, as you dial in, if you would like to let us know where you're listening in from, we'd love to see it. If you see this on delay, please remember you can also always download this as a podcast on whatever your favorite podcast platform is. And then lastly, I want to make sure before we get started that I say thank you to my colleague, Joey Pace, who is the magic behind the operations here and makes all this happen. So Joey, thank you. And with that, I'd like to welcome today's guest, as I mentioned, Ken Fenyo, who is the president of Coresight Research. Ken, welcome.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks for having me.
No, it is great to have you. So we've got a super timely topic talking about winning holiday 2022. And I can't think of anybody who is more dialed into all things retail than you are. So it's a pleasure to have you. As is our custom, before we get started, we always like to just do a little bit of an icebreaker, helps people kind of get to know you as a human being as well. So we've got something we call Rock's Fab Five in honor of one of our friends, Rock Robinson. So just to get started quickly, where were you born and raised, Ken?
So I was born in Los Angeles, although I only lived there for, I think, about 3 months. And I grew up most of my life in a town in New Jersey called Hohokus, which is H-O-H-O-KUS, which is in sort of the northeast part of New Jersey, close to New York City. So,
no, very cool. So we lived in Morristown for 5 years.
Oh,
so
all right, there you go. And then
I know exactly where Hohokus is. Hyphens included.
Yes. It's quite an unusual name. It's often confused with Hoboken, which is a little further south. But it was a nice place to grow up. You can't really complain. It was a great little small town to grow up in.
No, that's cool. And speaking of LA, hey, Charlie Bean, welcome. And then where did you go to school, Ken?
So I went to college out in Stanford, and then I went worked for a year in New York City, and then I went to law school in Boston at Harvard. So I've actually never really lived in the middle of the country. I've only lived on the coasts. It seems like I bounce between them east to west, and then right now we've lived in California for the last 20 plus years. So I guess now I'm a Californian, whether I want to be or not.
Well, there you go. You're an adopted Californian. And then you said we, so a little bit about your family?
Sure. I've been married now for, I think, 27 years. So it's pretty exciting. And then I have 3 daughters and 3 dogs. So quite the full complement of people and animals. So, so 3 dogs. We even have a new puppy that we just got. So who's quite
awesome. Very cool.
You may well hear in the background at some point during this session.
No, I actually, honestly, that's one of the things that I really, if you can enjoy something about COVID, but just sort of, seeing people's real lives and, dogs and babies and the whole bit. So I think it's kind of cool.
It winds up being quite the handful. I wish at some level we were better at training the dogs than we've proven to be, but they are a lot of fun.
I wish we did a better job with our 4 kids in that regard. And then, hey, Demet, hello from Istanbul. That's very cool. And Jesus, good to see you from Colorado. And then, Ken, you've had a very interesting career arc. And I think people would be fascinated. Your credentials are really terrific, education notwithstanding. So do you mind just sharing people a little bit about your career?
Yeah, sure. If I wind it all the way back, but I'll do the short version. I mentioned I had a law degree, and I wound up clerking for a year for a judge who was on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in San Diego, which mostly convinced me I didn't really want to be a lawyer. And so I wound up going to McKinsey, which at the time was beginning to recruit people from a non-MBA background. So which turned out to be a great fun. Did a lot of work in media, entertainment. And eventually we relocated out to the West Coast, sort of at the end of that. Then I did a startup in the e-commerce space, which was sort of a dot-com boom and bust. Did a little more consulting for a firm called Profit, mostly around kind of marketing and customer analytics. Then I went to Kroger, where I ran loyalty and digital for them. As of those who don't know Kroger, they're the largest traditional grocery chain in the US. And that was great. We wound up launching a whole bunch of innovations, some of which maybe we'll chat about a bit later. And then after, one of the things I did when I was at Kroger is I launched the first digital coupon program in the grocery space. And then I went to a startup called U Technology, which we then built out as the leading player of that technology. Definitely grew the company up. It was a great ride. And eventually we sold it to Kroger, of all people, all companies, I guess. And, after that, I wound up actually returning to McKinsey for a short stint. I would help start a group within McKinsey called Fuel, which was going to serve startup companies. I focused primarily on e-commerce and retail technology. Did that for a few years, and McKinsey was a great experience, but it was a very large firm. And so I was looking for something more entrepreneurial. And so then I left there and I joined Coresight Research, which is where I currently work. And we're a research and advisory firm that focuses on the intersection of retail and technology. So it brings together a lot of the things I'm really passionate about. And we're more of a startup, kind of scrappy startup, growing quickly in the retail world. And so it's been great to both have some of the focus on the key trends, but also a more entrepreneurial environment where we can figure out creative ways to serve our clients in the retail and technology world.
No, and which is one reason I'm super excited to have you on. And obviously sort of the depth and breadth of your experience between the McKinsey stuff, working at Kroger, selling the business to Kroger, technology. I think it all really makes for a very interesting package. And hello, Hamza from Pakistan. And then super quick, where do we find, we talked about 3 daughters and 3 dogs. So I think I might know where this is going, but where do we find you when you're not at work? What kinds of things do you like to do?
Yeah, so I'm pretty passionate about fitness and exercise. So I love to have a group of friends I go running with several times a week. I also will try to go to the gym and even do a little swimming, which is something I picked up in the COVID days when you couldn't do anything inside. So which is a nice change of pace. But otherwise, I really like to bake. So I bake bread, sourdough bread, if I have the time on the weekend. And then I also like to make various sweets, which I'm usually ordered to get out of the house. So I'll try to give them away to friends and others. But I do like to bake a cake. I cook too for the family. I'm sort of in charge of dinner, but I wouldn't say I have any particular skill at it. But I do like the sort of baked good end of it as well as bread.
This is what I love about asking these questions. I had no idea about the baking stuff. I think that's super cool. So you touched just for a second on Coresight, at the intersection of retail and technology. Do you mind just sort of double clicking on that for half of a second? Maybe some of the use cases or ways that you guys
Yeah, sure. We have we have really 3 businesses that we focus on. So one of them is we have a syndicated research service that covers really all areas of retail and technology. So food, mass, drug, apparel, home and home improvement, looking more at the technology side, supply chain, in-store automation, things like that. Yeah. That's sort of one big thing. And we have subscribers are large retailers, mall owners, technology companies that focus on retail, and others. And then we have a second part of our business. We do a lot of custom research. So we'll work with technology companies, both big and small, who are trying to establish thought leadership or get the word out about their market and their products. And then lastly, we do consulting or advisory work. So we'll work with some of the largest retailers and brands, as well as technology companies on things like live stream shopping or loyalty and personalization. We've done a lot of recent work in retail media and data monetization. So really some of the core ways that retailers are trying to grow as you think about all the disruption that's happened over the last number of years. And so those 3 businesses are really complementary. So we think we have really deep insights into retail and where it's going. And then we use that in a variety of ways with our clients to help them take advantage of it.
No, super cool. And so thank you. That was a great explanation. So today's topic is winning holiday 2022. And I think the timing is perfect to be having this conversation because it's all still pretty much right in front of us. So the first thing that I wanted to ask you about is obviously we are in and appears to be entering into more of a more challenging economic environment. both for businesses and for consumers. And so, how do you, first of all, how do you just sort of see that impacting, this holiday? And maybe the secondary question to that is, are there categories or channels that you see either benefiting or not benefiting from whatever those prevailing trends are?
Sure. Well, I think it's going to be I'm not sure interesting is quite the right word, but it'll be an interesting holiday season. So on the one hand, I think you're seeing a lot of mixed signals if I step back just a second in the economy. So some things like inflation have been hot and heavy. We've seen a lot of action from the Fed raising rates. That's causing all sorts of turmoil and choppiness in the economy. Dollar is strong, which has some pluses and minuses. On the consumer side, employment has remained strong. Wages have been going up. So it's not that it's all one story of being negative, but it's definitely a lot of choppiness and probably a little bit of uncertainty in where things are going to go. I think in terms of holiday, what we're predicting, it's a little bit of a good news, bad news story. So on the good news, we do think that retail spending is going to increase probably in the mid to high single digits. So if you're thinking somewhere between 5 and 9-ish%. The challenge is a lot of that's going to be driven by inflation and price increases as opposed to real sales. And so we actually just ran some consumer surveys looking at people's predicted spending. And what we've seen, not surprisingly, is more people are planning to spend less this year than they spent last year, which is a flip from what we saw last year, where you saw a lot of pent up demand and people are really looking to spend more. And I think what you're seeing is people are really buying less number of things, but they're paying more for them. So sales are going up, but really it's not because people are buying more, it's just because costs have gone up. And so when you look at real sales, so if you take out the effect of inflation, we're actually expecting to see a slight decline in sales over the holiday season. So you wouldn't necessarily see that in the top line numbers, but if you really kind of take out the sort of inflation part of it, we're expecting to see a decline in sales. Interestingly, it's about the same. Just a quick aside, you see the same thing with wages. Even though real wages have gone up, you might read a lot about how a lot of companies are raising wages to attract and retain workers. When you look at it on a real basis, actually wages are going down, which is another thing that factors in. So I think what we see is we're definitely going to see high real nominal sales, probably negative real sales. I think the real more challenging thing for retailers are going to be we're really expecting profits to get squeezed and margins to get squeezed. And so you can see it in a lot of things. Walmart, Target, a number of apparel companies have all come out saying that they just have too much inventory. They bought up on things that had been selling well, clothing, home, things like that now are not as selling as well because people are shifting some money into things like food, which I'll talk about in a sec. And so what we're expecting is pretty heavy promotional activity and discounting to start clearing out some of that inventory. So when we think of the picture for retailers in particular, good for consumers, lots of deals out there, bad for retailers, because in addition to sort of the real sales going down, we're expecting margins in particular to be pinched as they have to clear out a lot of this extra inventory.
Yeah. So, and I think I saw yesterday, like computer sales are like significantly down. So, a lot of things that people bought during the pandemic, outdoor furniture, computers, exercise stuff, all of a sudden like, hey, we need to build up our inventory for all that because there's a lot of demand, and supply chain kind of delayed delivery on a lot of stuff.
Yep.
All of a sudden it's shown up and it's like, oh my gosh, we have 40% more inventory than we should have at this point, as you say.
Yeah, well, it's what happened, I think, in general, people buy way in advance or order way in advance for holiday. I know when I was at Kroger, it was like a year in advance. We would place our orders for holiday the next year. And so with that kind of long thing, I think people thought that some of the trends were going to continue. They ordered up on things that had been selling well, like you mentioned, computers, other things. What we're seeing a lot now is with inflation, particularly in food inflation, what you're seeing is a lot of consumers, particularly people who aren't at the higher end of the income spectrum, are really devoting more of their spending to food and food related things. That just leaves less for everything else. So I think what you're seeing is people are buying less clothing. They're not buying, they're going to make that computer last another year, right? All those things because they're spending more of their budget on food And I still think there's some pent up. I do think in travel, you'll see, I think people are trying to hang on to some of the spending where they didn't get to do during the pandemic. So I still want to take that trip. So maybe I'll cut back in other areas when I think about that. So you asked about industries. I think that's why when you look at it, food, I think will continue to do well. It's an essential. People have really not much choice but to invest and buy the food that they need. I think you're going to see a lot less spending on some of the discretionary items like clothing. That's been particularly soft. I know just even back to like second quarter, I had some of our clients in apparel saying that they were seeing real drop in sort of traffic in the stores, real softening of demand. So I just think people are not going to spend a lot on clothing. I think home and home improvement, I think, are areas where you'll see a lot of drop off, if only because I think people are spending more money in other areas, but also we have that pent up demand that everyone spent out over after COVID. And now you're kind of seeing the trough as you sort of bought the clothing, you upgraded your home. Maybe I can wait a year or 2 years before I do that again. So I think you'll see some of those changes between categories.
Yeah, so I don't think of food necessarily as a gifting category. Are there gifting categories that you're more or less, optimistic about?
Food can be. I think people will give cards. I mean, we've seen a long-term trend in gift cards as being a huge holiday gifting, and I assume that will continue. I think it's turned out to be easy. I know my own kids love just getting sort of either money / gift cards for things, buy what they want. So I do think that will still go. I think most of the same. I think you will see apparel gifting. I think the traditional things people will do. I think you'll see people buy less for themselves, which is probably where you'll see the softness in something like apparel, right? Yeah. I may still buy for my kids, but I'm probably going to hold off buying for myself on some of those things. Pet might be an area. Oddly, people give gifts. We were sort of talking about dogs, but a lot of people have gone and bought pets. So I think we see one area we do see huge growth continued is in the pet category, whether that's food or that's toys or clothing or other things for pets. So that could be a category you might see a lot of gifting in.
You mentioned travel. I'm curious if maybe you think that rather than buying stuff, we might buy a trip to Disney, or we might buy a cruise, or, do something special that's more experiential than, tangible.
Yeah, that could definitely be. Certainly there's been a long-term trend towards more experiences, particularly with the Gen Z and millennials seem to have more of this idea. I'd rather spend on experiences than on product. That shifted a bit during COVID, just because you really couldn't go do the experiences, right? There wasn't travel was shut down. You couldn't necessarily go to the boutique exercise classes you might have gone. So I think you saw it start coming back last year. And I believe that trend will continue. I think there's still, you can now with COVID going down, you can travel. It might be more expensive in some areas. The truth matter is, though, I've had a number of, this more just personal experience, but a number of friends of making plans to go to Europe because the dollar is so strong. In some ways, actually going to Europe, going to Asia, I think it's going to be cheaper for a U.S. audience at least. So I would imagine people will try to take advantage of that, even if they may be not spending as much on some other categories.
Yeah, because that's like a 20-30% discount depending on what you're.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like we should all go to Europe now. If you have ever thought about going to it, now's probably the time. Just given
now would be the. Just quickly, are there channels that you expect to do better or less well this holiday compared to previous years?
Well, I think generally I would expect e-commerce broadly to continue to do well. I don't think that means brick and mortar is going away. Matter of fact, we saw a resurgence in brick and mortar this year, interestingly. So we track store openings and closures. Generally speaking, we've done it for, this is I think our 10th or 11th year doing it. This is actually we're actually predicting there's going to be significantly more store openings than closures this year, which is reversing a pretty long-standing trend, probably about 5-6 year trend where we saw more closings than openings. So I don't think brick and mortar is dead. As a matter of fact, I think people have shown they want to get out and they want that social experience of shopping. I would say that generally speaking, malls have struggled and will probably continue to struggle. Not necessarily the high-end malls. I think those sort of flagship malls continue to draw traffic. They have the retailers, consumers they want to go shop and see in person, whether that's more luxury or or fun shopping experiences. I would say more of the mid-range malls will probably struggle and continue to struggle that we've seen. But I would expect e-commerce definitely to do well. I will say one thing we're seeing strong growth in. Matter of fact, we host a shopping festival called 1010, which was on October 10th. That was very focused on live stream shopping. We see that as a really fast growing new channel in the US. So it's sort of doing a little bit of the digital version of Home Shopping Network. It's a massive industry in China, something like 500 billion in gross merchandise sales per year. It's probably maybe around 20 billion in the US, but we really see it beginning to take off. And after a few years, I think, of retailers and brands experimenting with it, that could really make a big difference. And we'll expect to see more companies try to take advantage of sort of this more video-centric way of selling. So, if we were
just on live streaming, because I don't hear people talk about that a lot. So this is worth kind of exploring for a minute.
Yeah.
Is this more like traditional retailers, brands? Is this more DTC kind of, Instagram native brands doing stuff like this, or who's actually live streaming and where's the future?
Like a lot of things, I think it probably earlier, if you go back a few years, had a little bit more of the upstart brands who saw it as a chance to really put their founder or the brand leader up front, where you could talk about the brand story and why did I decide to create this brand or these products. And I think it had a great way of that storytelling that you couldn't really get through other platforms. We're seeing an increasingly large number, though, of larger brands start to do it. Walmart is probably the leader in the space. They've done a huge investment in live stream shopping. They do it on their own platform. They've done it on TikTok. They've done it on YouTube. They've done it on Twitter. They do it with smaller platforms like TalkShop Live. So I think you're seeing larger players really begin to get into it and expand it. I'd say for many of the larger players, it's something they're testing and they're figuring out how exactly to make it work. One thing we find is one big difference, interestingly, it's actually a medium that does better when you don't over-program it. What we do see is a lot of bigger players all want to produce it like it's a TV ad or it's a TV program. Whereas frankly, what we found is someone with like an iPhone and a ring light can do just as well. And matter of fact, even better if they're engaging and, they take the time to engage with the chats and answer questions during the live stream. So, but we are seeing it grow. And like I said, that one of the reasons we're excited about it is because you're seeing more established companies begin to adopt it, whether that's in apparel and beauty, even in things like food and home as well.
Yeah, well, so we had Paco Underhill on a few weeks ago, and one of the things that he talked a lot about is such a big opportunity, particularly in this inflationary environment, that we're not as rational as maybe sometimes we think that we are, But he said that a big opportunity for brands is to do more educating. And so like you just reminded me, like when you're talking about the food thing, like, let me show you how to do this, right? Which is like such a perfect use case for live streaming and being able to educate me on, hey, that looks cool. That looks like something I would like or my family would like or whatever. And you can actually learn something. And to your earlier point, it's not just sort of this, head-on commercial. It was, I actually learned something. It was entertaining, and I actually want to buy that.
Yeah. And I'd say, one of the problem of e-commerce, but certainly a characteristic of e-commerce, it is just by nature more transactional, right? I search for a product, I find it, I buy it. If you think about particularly Amazon, the nice thing about something like live stream shopping is it is more of an experience. You get somebody out there who is passionate about the product. They're going to explain how they use it, why they like it, why maybe they like it better than something else, or how you think about two different products that we offer. A lot of times what you have is a very active chat function. So you might have people asking questions of, does that come in a bigger size? How true to life is the color? Maybe they'll ask a question on food side about a recipe. Do you think this would go well with chicken if it's, if it's maybe a spice or something? And so I think that interactive experience, but also the chance for somebody to talk about the product in more detail, why they're passionate about it. It's just something you can't really get when you're just looking at a product detail page. Matter of fact, we're seeing, there's companies out there like Firework that are not just only doing live streaming, but creating more shoppable videos. So you could imagine this too, just being, rather than just looking at a product page and seeing the description, maybe I'll have a little snippet of video where somebody talks about it. You see that already in maybe things like, if you think about, looking for a backpack, you'll have the video where somebody shows you taking stuff in and out. But it does give you a real feel for the item. It gives you a sense of why I should be excited about this. And, I know that one thing we do find on the live streams is that returns tend to be a lot less because people are getting a real feel and they're buying it because they really understand the product, not because they look at a quick detail and they're like, yeah, that looks fine. And then they get it and they're like, no, it's not what I wanted. So we do find one of the benefits of live stream shopping is this idea that you get fewer returns because people are more likely to really find the products that work for them and only buy that when they've gotten that extra detail.
No, that's cool. Well, let's use this as kind of a pivot point, because I know that you guys, obviously have tons of expertise in the different kinds of tools, technology, strategies that retailers and brands can employ. So we've kind of doubled down on live streaming for a minute. What are some of the other things, whether it's personalization, you talked about retail media networks,
Yep.
other things that retailers and brands can do to win this year?
Yeah, and so, I guess if I look at a few things, we're definitely seeing a lot of activity around loyalty and personalization, retail media and data monetization. And then, like I said, some of these ways of really thinking about your e-commerce experience. Those are certainly three ways I think we see retailers both investing in and really should be investing in. I think on the loyalty side, one thing we're seeing is it's getting more and more expensive to acquire customers. At the same time, with prices going up, loyalty is more of a challenge. We definitely see consumers more open to switching, right? If they find something at a lower price or if they find a better experience. And so we do think it's important for retailers to think more about loyalty. And that really is a few elements. I think thinking about it more as an experience. I think you see a lot of loyalty, or retailers really think about loyalty as a discount. Let me give an extra discount. And really what you find is, while everyone wants a discount, whenever we test this, it's not like people say, no, I really don't want to save any money. I'd rather spend more. I mean, everyone wants a discount. But when we look beyond that, people do value more of the intangible benefits, right? And even in retail, they really look for things like, can I get early access to a sale? Are there special things that are exclusive to people who are loyalty members? Think about Nike does a great job at this, right? The drops that are just for their members, or the early access to a sale because you're a member of a program. Those things have real value. And honestly, they don't really cost a lot. It's not like you have to invest huge money to give somebody early access, your better customers early access. And so thinking about that, and then personalization, really, even though it's not a new thing. I mean, when I was at Kroger, this is now back like 15 years ago, we were very heavily focused on delivering personalized offers to our customers, and it had huge impact. But, I look ahead and there's still a lot of retailers who don't ultimately take advantage of what they know about their customers to do things like, let me make you an offer for something I know you're going to like, or let me recommend a product that maybe you haven't bought, but we think is going to be a great fit for you. And the more you can get aligned with what customers really want, what their real preferences are, that really just, the loyalty effect of that is huge, right? When you get something that feels like these guys know me and they're giving me a deal or even just a recommendation on something that I'm going to love, that has huge impact, much more than just giving somebody $1 off.
Can you explain? Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I was going to talk a little bit of retail media, but.
Well, that's where I was getting ready to go. I really want to hear how you would think about encouraging, particularly brands, to best leverage, retail media network, and maybe just a small definition of what you mean by that.
Yeah, so there are a lot of definitions out there. To me, retail media is really about retailers using the data that they're capturing on customers to deliver advertising or even other marketing on their own website, and then as well off-site or on third-party websites. And that could, for the retailer's own that could be their own websites, but it'd also be in store. And so it's the idea of how do you add relevant additional content, but where the retailers can make some alternative revenue off it, as well as drive sales. And so if I think about Kroger for a second, or Walmart, I go online, I'm searching for, let's say, mac and cheese. The idea is that one of the brands who sell mac and cheese can come on and say, well, I want to make sure they see my product when they're searching for mac and cheese. And so an obvious example of where you see an ad could be Kraft could advertise their mac and cheese. They could do that in a variety of ways. That could be a sponsored search ad. It could be a display ad. It could be an offer. There's a lot of ways they can engage. But the idea is that hopefully it's relevant for me. First point should be, it should be relevant for me, the consumer. Like I'm not seeing some product I don't care about. I'm seeing something that would be relevant, that I might be interested in buying and then have some value for me. And then from the retailer's point of view, not only do I hopefully drive some more sales, but I'm able to make some alternative revenue. And ultimately, it's an important metric because retail has always been a low margin business. E-commerce is frankly it's harder to make profit in e-commerce than it is in the brick and mortar world. And so I think thinking about ways that you can add incremental revenue streams to offset some of those costs, I think is important for retailers to think about. But ultimately, I think to me, it always comes back, can we have a win-win here? Can I actually create a better experience where I'm surrounding the consumer with recommendations and sort of suggestions that are going to be relevant to them, but where I can then also hopefully better sort of bring in incremental revenue that I could use to either invest in other parts of my business I'm trying to invest in. And so we see retailers doing this, like I said, on their own properties, but then that data can also be matched with social media or the broader web so that when people are trying to find audiences online, they can do it. It's in this sort of, you do it usually through a clean room, so they're not sharing personal data, but it does allow brand advertisers, let's say on Facebook, to really understand, am I reaching somebody who might be interested in my product? And then do they eventually go and buy it? And so the ultimate game is to have a win-win for both the brands and the retailers, around their shared customer.
Yeah, but even back on the most basic use case, which is like, I'm searching for mac and cheese and being found above the fold. You're the expert in this, not me. What's the conversion? It's like, is it 70% if you're like not above the fold?
Well, definitely above the fold is probably something like that. In terms of your higher percent, I would still say most ads don't necessarily get a click through. Interestingly, we find a lot higher engagement in the store. So if you think about, there's companies like, I don't know if you've ever seen a company called Cooler Screens. But what they do is, on the freezer doors or on the refrigerator doors, they're placing ads and other things. And those can have really high conversion because the idea is you're standing in front of this cooler and, maybe the idea is they're going to market ice cream when it's a hot day and it's a certain time, it's sort of in the mid-afternoon and you're looking for a snack. Let me market something that I know is going to be relevant for you. Those can have really high conversion. We definitely see meaningful conversion in terms of the retail media side. I think ultimately it's all about the return for the advertiser.
So real quickly, with respect to if you've got a lot of visibility into this, like thinking about what the leaders are doing, across all the tools that are available to them versus what the laggards are or are not doing. What are some of the key differentiators?
Yeah. So, I think, thinking about retail generally, what I would say is one of the big differences between leaders and laggards, I think, is whether you're really customer first or customer focused. And in some ways, it's a funny thing to say. Everyone says they're customer focused, but the truth is a lot of retail still remains very product or merchandising focused. So, you go to a lot of retailers, everything's about what's my new product that I'm bringing out? What are the cool features and functionality about it? What am I going to price it at? What kind of promotion am I going to do? That's really true across whether you're in food or you're in apparel or home. In some ways, it doesn't matter. It's a lot harder to be customer centric, which is really to ask what's really important to my customers and how am I going to serve them? And how do I use data and insights about my customers to really change how I operate? Whether that's what goes on the shelf, what products I develop, how do I market and price it? How do I actually gear my business to my better customers or my best customers and make sure they are super happy in what they're getting? It's easier. It's very much easier said than done. I would say at Kroger, where I was at, it was probably really a 10-year journey where they said, we're going to do business differently. We're going to start with the consumer. We're going to really understand what's important to them. And then we're going to build the business around that, whether that's the products we carry, how we think about price and promotion, how we think about even store layouts, where we put stores. But that was probably a 10-year journey. It was not overnight. And I think when I look at a lot of retailers, they still really don't fully get how they would leverage customer data to help them think about the business, drive the business forward. So to me, that's the biggest difference. The companies that are really good at thinking about the customer, thinking about how they serve them better, I think are going to lead. On the customers that are more price centric, you get a few like a Walmart that can really win by being having low cost products, EDLP. But most people can't keep pace with that. For everyone else, it's really about how can you really serve your customers well, build loyalty, build repeat purchase over time. And that really starts and ends with data, and really a willingness to serve, really go where the customer wants you to go, not necessarily, where you've gone historically in terms of.
Is the playing field pretty level for a retailer? Like if I'm collecting, a sufficient amount of data, are the analytic tools and the ability to mine and kind of squeeze the juice, is that playing field fairly level, or is it lopsided?
Well, I mean, look, the tools are out there. I think for a lot of retailers, it's a struggle to build the capabilities you need to fully take advantage of it, in terms of skill sets. So there are plenty of partners out there that I think you can take advantage of and work with that can bring you some of those capabilities. So I think for a lot of retailers, it's that combination of having to hire a few people in-house, plus maybe finding a partner who can really bring new capabilities into the organization. But I still think the challenge is less the technical side of it, because the tools are definitely out there, you're right, than more of the mindset. Because you have to really both, on the one hand, commit yourself to wanting to run your business that way, right? Am I going to listen to the data? I've been in a lot of meetings where you'll run a lot of analysis, it'll point a very clear direction, but people will say, well, my gut tells me something else. And it's not to say that gut doesn't come into it. I mean, it's hard to do apparel without having some sense of where fashion is going, right? It can't all be the numbers. But I do think that a lot of times retailers don't always trust the data. And that's really almost like a mindset shift that has to happen as well. And that's maybe bigger than the technical side of it, in terms of really taking advantage of what the data can tell you.
I think that is a huge takeaway, that it's more mindset than availability of assets and tools to play with the assets. It really is mindset. Yeah. And we look at the biggest retailers and we know that they're all very consumer and data centric simultaneously.
Yeah. And I would say one thing that goes along with that mindset thing would be, it's really willingness to try new things. You look at Kroger's, you look at the Walmarts, some of it may be forced by Amazon, but Amazon's another great one. The top players are willing to take some chances. They're trying things and seeing how it works. I think it's very hard to play catch up in this day and age. I think technology has moved too fast. I think this idea that I'll just wait a couple years, I'll see how it plays out, then I'll get into it. You can certainly do that. I just think it's very hard to catch up. You think about e-commerce, right? If you've not been investing in e-commerce for the last 5 years, just jumping into it now, you can do it, but you're really playing catch up, and I don't think that's really a great place to be, particularly since you're going to catch up to where a Walmart was 2 years ago, right? Not where they are now. And so I think that's really just important to think about that mindset of I really can't just rest on my laurels, right? I've got to think about where's my consumer going, where's the business going, and I'm going to try to stay ahead of that, not behind.
Yeah, well, and Jesus had a great little quote in there. Hippo often wins, highest paid person's opinion. And
that's the entire consulting model right there.
That's definitely true. That resonates. Because I do want to transition into some career advice. Yeah, sure. Is there anything that we haven't touched on, Ken? Just thinking about holiday 2022 that you would make sure that we touch on.
Not necessarily for holiday. I think we've covered that. I will say maybe one quick point I would make would be that there's definitely a difference on the customer side. And since we've been talking about customer, there's definitely a bifurcation where the more affluent people are continuing to spend, you're certainly seeing some of these challenges around inflation and other things really pinching the middle to lower income segments of the population. So I think you're going to see, that's why you see things like dollar stores continue to really grow quickly on the one hand, and frankly, luxury has been doing really well. I remembered about a month or two ago, I was at a dinner with, had a number of luxury brands were in it, and they were all talking about how they were passing through all their cost increases and then some, and getting really no pushback. And so you have to sort of understand the economy is definitely we've seen for a while some bifurcation, but that's increasingly part of the, okay. So if you're in a luxury business, you may do really well. If you're more of a mainstream seller, you're probably going to have more struggles over the next.
Yeah, I think I just saw yesterday, LVMH had really strong results.
Yeah, exactly.
They live in a different, they live in a different reality than I think a lot of folks are. But, between, there's the real wage stuff that we talked about, and true inflation and gas prices and food prices. But there's also a perceived, poverty, strong word, but, feeling less affluent anyway. The housing bubble has definitely started to correct. Right. I look at my stock portfolio, it's down. So it's sort of like you have both the money that's really in my checking account and what I feel like my net worth is. And I do think that people are feeling a lot of pressure. And it seems like people are going to be very selective in what they buy this year. And so the ability to tell a story, create an experience will really be paramount for the folks who are going to win.
Yeah, no, totally agree.
So quickly on, because you have had such a cool career between, the law degree and clerking and, 2 times at McKinsey, obviously the Kroger experience, everything. You've been a successful entrepreneur. What do you feel, what advice would you give your younger self, or even as, I'm sure you talk with your daughters about, maybe things that they may think about going to college and stuff. What's sort of your top line career advice based on your experience?
Sure. I guess I would say at a highest level, I think it's definitely to find something you can be excited about. That's kind of trite. I know we say that sort of stuff a lot, but it is important. You want to be excited about going to a job. You don't want your job to feel like just drudgery. There's always part of the job that's sort of, the drudgery work part, but you want to be excited about it, whether that's a company or whether that's a sector or a type of work you want to do. It's like, find the thing that's really passionate about, and you can get excited about getting up every day. But if I was thinking about this a little bit, and I would say one thing that, and I'm not sure I actually think this is something I didn't follow as much as I should have. So but in retrospect, if I could change something, it might be this, which is, is definitely think more about people than the job itself. And so, but what I mean by that is, you're going to come along the way in your career of people who are mentors, right? People you really like working for, really give you the chance to grow, train you, share their wisdom, and who support you. And I think thinking about following them wherever they might go, in some ways is more important than thinking about the job I'm going to have, the title I'm going to have. I would say, like, if you have somebody you're close to and they say, hey, I'm leaving company A, I'm going to company B, it's in a different area, maybe the role you're going to do is different, do you want to come with me? I'd go with that person, right? Because the opportunity, in some ways, that's where you get the real meat of your career. And I think it opens up more doors than you're going to suspect. A lot of times you tend to fall back on, well, what's my title? What am I going to be doing? And I really think in retrospect, like I'm thinking now in my own career, like there's a few times in some ways if I could do one thing or a few things differently, it might be a few times I should have just followed somebody who I considered a mentor, who maybe the opportunity wasn't exactly what I would have picked next, but I think in retrospect, it would have opened up a lot of opportunities that maybe I didn't even realize I was going to have at the time. And ultimately, you can think about that in terms of companies. I'd rather be at a place where I really enjoyed my team, my coworkers, and enjoyed the experience is a little more important than having, that next step up title. Because that stuff will all come. We're always impatient when we're younger. We think it should come right now. But it's much better to be with people who are going to mentor you and provide a great team experience than it is necessarily just to get the, like I said, the next, couple dollars more.
Yeah, the one build, or not even build, but just sort of agreeing with you is, like, when we're consulting with clients, particularly when they want to go in a fairly different direction, make a bit of a shift, one of the things that we coach them on is that's okay, but oftentimes that's going to be because the person who's in that different industry than what you've been doing is somebody who already knows you. And the headline I would put on that is trust. And so when you're following somebody, like, you had a great boss at company A and now they've moved on to company B. It's like, I'm not really sure I wanted to be in the trucking industry, but I really liked working for Susan. She's such a great boss, right? There's trust.
Yeah.
And I think that just has almost everything to do with the quality of the experience, irrespective of, as you say, title, industry, whatever.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's a little, it's almost a thing you don't necessarily think about. It's almost like, oh, I'll always, finding people who you really work well with and trust you and support you. It's not that there's only one out there in the world, but they're also it's not like every place you go, you're going to find that. I think when you do, particularly when you're earlier in your career, I think I would definitely recommend that just as a way to think about it. Ultimately, the hardest thing about being younger is you don't realize a career is kind of the long game, not the short game, right? I think we all think about the current job, the next job, but ultimately it's, you're thinking about a 10, 20, 30-year career. It's not going to be it's in most cases not a linear line.
Well, you took the word out of my mouth. That's what I love about your career is it's very nonlinear, and to see that you can end up in a very good place in a nonlinear way, which I think is cool. Last question. You've done a lot of hiring in your career. What are some of the talent attributes that you're interviewing for that really resonate with you?
Sure. Well, for me, I'd say I have a few things that I look for. I'd say one of the first things I think about is somebody quick on their feet. And by that, what I mean is you want smart, but I prefer in terms of, book smart's great, people with degrees from great schools. I think I've been lucky to go to some good schools, but frankly, having gone to good schools, I don't think that's the be all and the end all. I'd rather have somebody who's has a bit more street smarts, somebody who can react quickly to questions, who seems like maybe have a bit of a wit. I think all that is really, when you get into business, you're not going to have weeks or months or years to analyze every problem, right? You want people who can think quickly, can kind of process information quickly, kind of come up with at least an initial hypothesis. Maybe you'll test it later. So that is one thing I look for. I like people who seem quick on their feet. Along with that, though, it's sort of the confident, but some degree of humility, right? You don't want the super arrogant person. Ultimately, business, I feel, is a team sport. It's really about building the team and having the team work well. I've had a few times where you've had the superstar employee, huge talent, but frankly, no one likes working with them, right? They're difficult. They can be abrasive. And honestly, in some way, I found in most cases, their talent is outweighed by the problems they cause for the team. And so I'm usually looking for somebody who I think will fit in with the team, who will add to the team and sort of be somebody who wants to roll up their sleeves and pitch in, not somebody who, expects to be treated, sort of as special all the time. And then, I would say the last one is I do like leadership. This is a little bit of a McKinsey one, but I do think it resonates, which is, you want people who want to take on more responsibility, right? Have people shown in the past that they're willing to step up and take a leadership role? Whether that could be if you're right out of college, that could be you were a leader in one of your college clubs, or you played sports and had a leadership role. It could be at an early job you stepped up and took on maybe a new project that was a bit out of your comfort zone. I think you're looking for those people who want to take on more, and have shown some ability to motivate other people. Because ultimately, when you bring in somebody, I'm always thinking when you bring in someone, you want to see that this is the kind of person who's going to grow and be able to take on more responsibility over time. And not everyone necessarily wants that. Some people want to be told where to go, but what I find is that, the best people are the ones who want to grow, play that team game, but also over time are going to be both willing and able to take on more leadership and sort of grow with the company.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I like how you one team sport. That's great. Yes. Nobody's a lone ranger at work ever. And so it's definitely a team sport. And then two, I really like how you said, even when you're young, you can still demonstrate leadership qualities. You don't have to have been the president of GE for 20 years, and I think sometimes some of our younger clients struggle with, but I don't have all this experience, but you do have experience, and you do have proof points that you can show. And if you don't, that's something that you can start to fix immediately, is by trying to identify and embrace a leadership opportunity and start to build those skill sets. It even reminds me a little bit of what you were saying earlier about, being customer centric and like how long it took, Kroger to do that. What do they say? The best time to, planted a tree was 10 years ago. The next best day is today.
Yeah, exactly.
So you might as well get started when you can get started. By the way, I love Charlie's comment here, improvise, adapt, and overcome. And that is sort of the trick, because work isn't a straight line either, right? And, unfortunately, sometimes the clients didn't get the script.
Absolutely. I think you have to look. I mean, it's if there was a cookie cutter approach, then right, every company would be super successful, right? I think it's especially particularly when you're at a smaller company or more of a growth stage company. I think being willing to try things and sort of take setbacks in stride and use them as a chance to figure out how do we get better, I think is important. I think that's been true in big companies too. But definitely if you're at a little smaller company, you really have to think ahead, right? Ultimately, it's that's what it comes down to, right? Can you be creative and look ahead, and then do you have the kind of team and people who are willing to take some chances and really go after what could be a big opportunity.
Yeah, that ultimately for me is what makes work fun. So I want to be mindful of the time here. This has been great, Ken. I knew that you would crush it, and that we had so many good insights that came out of this. I'm looking forward to re-listening to this and really taking it in a bit more. If people wanted to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Probably the best way is if you want to get me by email, I'm at Ken Fenyo. It's actually all one word, KenFenyo at Coresight, CORESIGHT.com. And you can also, if you want to just check out our website, we're at www.coresight, CORESIGHT.com. And we have a bunch of, you definitely have some free research on the site. And if you certainly want to talk more about any of the topics we talked about today, or you see on the site, just let me know. I'd love to.
Yeah, and I would highly recommend people do that. I've downloaded a couple of the white papers myself in preparation for this, and really, really strong content. So, Ken, thank you so much. What a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bob. I appreciate it. It's been a great chat.
No, and thank you everybody who took the time to dial in today. And we wish everyone well and a happy holiday as that approaches. So thank you, and we wish you a great week. Bye-bye.